welcome again to another edition of the CSG Vodcast. We have a special guest today. His name is Dr. Charles Theuer. He is the CEO and President, Director of Tracon Pharmaceuticals. He's also been the Chief Medical Officer at Tracon, where he initiated development of small molecular kinase inhibitors in oncology, ophthalmology, and cardiovascular disease. He's also worked at Pfizer, leading clinical development of Sutent in a kidney cancer, which was approved in 2006 for preventing and treating advanced kidney cancer. He's held senior positions at IDEC Pharmaceuticals, National Cancer Institute, developing all kinds of other small molecular and monoclonal antibody therapies. He's got a BS from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, an MD degree from University of Cal, and a PhD from the University of California, Irvine. He's been a surgeon for many years in the area of cancer. Doc, it's really great to have you. How are you?
Great to be here, Dave. Thanks for taking time and looking forward to talking science and drug development with you.
Yeah, this is going to be great for our audience. So let's dig right in. Let's talk about science and drug development. What's going on in your world today? What are you working on? What should we all get excited about?
Yeah, it's actually a very exciting time to your point to be in drug development. Our focus is oncology, and our goal is to develop new drugs to treat especially cancers that really haven't seen major advances in many years. For instance, our lead program is in sarcoma. Unfortunately, the most active drug in sarcoma is a drug that was approved almost 50 years ago, which gives you an idea that we need to do better. So our lead program is to a drug candidate that's designed to meet an unmet need in sarcoma. And Tracon, we also really proud of our drug development expertise in terms of how we develop drugs. And maybe I'll give a little bit of detail on that by kind of making clear what really is the issue in drug development today, and that's the cost of drug development. Really at this time, for each newly approved drug, the amount of capital that is invested is about $2 billion. And that incredible price tag reflects two things. One is that most drugs fail. Most drugs do not work. And so all the money that goes into the failed drugs combined with the money that goes into programs that lead to approval of the drugs, you add all that up, divide it by the number of approved drugs, it's about $2 billion for each newly approved drug. The second issue is just how much it costs to conduct clinical trials that support the application for approval of a drug candidate. And those costs are very, very high. What we do at Tracon is we streamline the drug development process by streamlining the clinical trial implementation process. And so we use software solutions and a highly organized team to decrease the cost of conducting clinical trials by doing it with our own team in-house, as opposed to outsourcing to third parties, which typically result in much higher costs.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. So you've kind of developed a new method that makes it go a little quicker?
Yeah, we call it's really a new paradigm that we use. It's used by other companies too. So other larger pharmaceutical companies like Beijing or Seagen, who market drugs for cancer patients, also do their own trials with their own team. And they've recognized that if you do trials yourself, you can do them at much lower costs. You can really champion technology solutions that help reduce the manpower needed to do trials and also reduce the redundancy, and redundancy leads to errors. So if you don't have to do two things and you can only do it once, you'll reduce redundancy, you'll streamline the process. That's a software solution. That's part of what we do. But I think the biggest thing we do by avoiding outsourcing trials to what are called contract research organizations is we avoid the way that they get paid, which I don't think is the best way to incentivize a third party to do trials. The way most CROs get paid is what we call bid to win managed profit mechanism, meaning they'll bid on a contract, but the final price usually is higher than what they bid. And that's because they get paid fee for service, but also they get monthly management fees. And that kind of incentive really doesn't encourage rapid low cost or high quality trial conduct. If you do all that internally, you actually control those processes. And so we feel we can do trials much more quickly at about a third the cost and also improve the quality. So companies like us, like Seagen, like Beijing, that do trials themselves, I think are hopefully at the forefront of what I hope will be a movement that other companies will adopt our practices, also internalize their own operations, and reap the same benefits we have, doing trials much more quickly at lower cost while enhancing quality.
It sounds great as a layman in this world, and many of my listeners probably are too. My first question would be, it seems like if you're doing your own trials, do you get some pushback from whoever's overseeing those, that there's maybe a bias in the trial? How does that work?
That's a great question, Dave. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you think back in the industry, say 20, 30 years ago, the majority of companies, big pharma too, were doing their trials themselves with their own team. Then this movement came out to outsource trials under the thought that might be more cost effective. And now I think the pendulum's swinging back to realizing it may not be as cost effective as people thought. But what you point out is important, is governance. You have to make sure when you're doing trials, you're doing them in an unbiased way.
Yeah.
So you need to have a strong governance. You need to make sure your systems are validated and you test them to make sure they're validated. And you need to make sure you have standard operating procedures and work instructions, for example, that govern how the systems are used to eliminate the bias potential that you talked about. Tracon, for example, we perform our trials and use systems that are compliant with the Code of Federal Regulations, which govern kind of the entire drug development industry to make sure things are done, to your point, to plan. I think what you said is such an important point. Even yesterday, there was an oncology advisory committee meeting, which is a special meeting of the FDA to review specific drugs, and they reviewed a drug from Amgen. And they basically said, we're not going to approve this drug because we thought there were issues in how the trial was conducted.
Wow.
That prohibit us from considering that this should be used for approval of the drug. So governance is important. And that was a trial done by Amgen. I'm not sure whether they outsourced or insourced, but I would say most companies tend to outsource. So it just shows you, you have to be careful and govern the trial incredibly well, regardless of whether you do it in-house or outsource, in order to make sure the results are not biased.
This is very fascinating. I'm sure we all, everybody's touched by cancer, someone in their life. Everyone. I don't think there's any exception. Your particular kind that you're studying and working on, I think you said sarcoma. Could you just give us a little detail of exactly what kind you're working on, and could you give us a little feel for what your personal feeling is making headway and how we're doing?
Sure. Yeah, sarcoma is a rare cancer compared to the most common cancer, say lung cancer for men, also prostate cancer for women, breast cancer. Sarcoma is one of the rarer tumors.
Okay.
So not as many people are focused on that cancer type. A person with sarcoma, it's a cancer of the connective tissue, like could be a joint, a muscle, for example. Typically, it was noticed as a lump on the leg or extremity. And it's people may think they just bumped their leg and there's a little bump or bruise there, and then they realize it doesn't go away, and that's actually a sarcoma.
Wow.
When people have sarcoma, hopefully it's small enough it can just be removed surgically, and that's the best situation. Sometimes radiation is used to shrink the tumor prior to surgery or even after surgery. Unfortunately, sometimes it's too big just to remove surgically. And the other problem is sometimes it's already spread or spread subsequently to become metastatic and involve other sites like the lung. And when that happens, generally surgery is not enough to cure the disease. You need to use some type of therapy, systemic therapy or chemotherapy. And for sarcoma, the most effective treatment is chemotherapy. And that's typically used as the first treatment for advanced or metastatic sarcoma that cannot be resected surgically. We're focused on patients that will fail chemotherapy, which unfortunately every patient who gets chemotherapy will fail, and presenting another option to patients who fail chemotherapy. The focus of our therapy is immunotherapy. You've seen commercials probably for Opdivo or Keytruda. These are drugs that activate the patient's own immune system to attack the cancer. Our drug is in that same class of therapies. We're using our drug in an attempt to activate the immune system of the patient to attack the cancer. And that's the focus of our trial.
Wow. How's it looking?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so we're anticipating full accrual this year, and we've passed what are called the futility rules in our trial. So sometimes when a trial is not going well, there's certain rules. It's not going well, just stop the trial because there's no reason to continue. So we passed those futility hurdles with our goal to achieve a double-digit response rate in these patients. And a double-digit response rate would be meaningful to patients because the therapy they that's currently approved for them has but a 4% response rate, which just gives you an idea of how tough the tumors are that we're focused on. That sarcoma is a tough one to treat when you have a standard of care approved therapy that only has a 4% response rate.
Wow. Well, this could go on for hours, but I'm going to just wrap it up for some of our folks. I'm going to ask you about, we talked a little bit about this. How has AI affected your research, and do you see that as a very promising way for science to move quicker?
AI definitely making an impact in our field, Dave, for sure. So we don't engage in drug discovery, but there are a lot of companies that are focused on drug discovery where AI has made a major impact. It does help us with respect to clinical trial conduct. There are a lot of forms, as you can imagine, that you have to collect to open a site to do clinical trials. And in the old days, people used to just manually go through each form and file it in the right folder, if you will. Now with AI, you can use these AI bots that just pick up the title and automatically file it, saves a ton of individual manpower hours. So AI is permeating drug development broadly, drug discovery, clinical trial implementation, which is what we specialize in, and will continue to become more and more of a part of our business. Radiology assessments done by individual radiologists, I think that's going to be extremely influenced by AI, for example.
That is fantastic. What do you hope for the future for Tracon itself? Do you see some of these drugs getting approved and making a pretty nice contribution to what's going on out there in the?
Yeah, that is our goal, to move our drug candidates through the clinical trial process to the approval process, and then to commercialize to increase the good options for patients beyond what's currently available, which I would argue is not very helpful at this time. We also would like to see our model of in-house clinical trial conduct permeate the ecosystem and for other companies to adopt that model. And we're happy to teach companies to do trials, if you will, the Tracon Way, and reap the same benefits we do of doing trials more quickly, cutting your costs significantly, and also enhancing quality. So that's our other kind of initiative, is to help the ecosystem. Just think if we could develop 3 drugs for the price of every one, what potential impact that could have in our field.
It would be amazing, especially the cost of science and medicine today. Wow, it's going crazy. Well, gosh, out there in the world that's listening to this, you heard what he said. Tracon's willing to help other companies. If you know anybody in the industry, reach out to Dr. Theuer and maybe Tracon and learn some more about what they do. It's been an extreme pleasure, and maybe you and I should do a live interview where people can call in and ask questions in the future. That would be awesome.
Would welcome that, Dave. Thanks for your time, too.
I've enjoyed having you on. Thank you for your time, especially. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Bye now.